where order meets chaos. Famed Israeli writer Amos Oz called doubt and argument the syndrome of Jewish civilization and today's Israel. How many first world countries require lengthy military service of all of their citizens? The list is pretty short. South Korea, Singapore, and Israel. All of them face existential threats. South Korea is constantly at risk from attack by the North. Singapore only gained its independence from Britain as part of Malaysia in 1963. It embarked on an additional struggle for independence from Malaysia in 1965. Since then, it has faced threats from Indonesia and a communist insurgency in Indochina. Interestingly, the IDF forged a strategic link with Singapore, producing 2 manuals for its nascent army. Should we perhaps think of Singapore and Israel in similar terms? After all, Singapore, like Israel, prides itself on diversity. It's a nation of immigrants, and its military is modeled on the IDF. But Singapore, considered the great Asian tiger, doesn't incubate all that many startups. Maybe the problem lies in a trio of necessary attributes: initiative, risk-taking, and agility. What about Korea and Israel? Are they pretty similar? Korea, like Israel, is home to many large technology companies. Just look at Samsung. But it spawns relatively few startups. Maybe that's because the fear of failure muffles the spirit of entrepreneurship. Israelis, by contrast, don't care so much about the social price of failure. Take, for example, IDF commando Tal Rosenfeld, who took first place in a Harvard competition for entrepreneurship. He started a company called iView in Tel Aviv.
We're here with Tal Riesenfeld, co-founder and vice president business development at iView, straight off the stage from his presentation at IAB's Innovation Days at Internet Week. Can you describe iView for us, please?
Yes, iView personalizes video advertisements. So the idea is that every viewer gets an ad which is personalized to him, broadcast quality with all the information that digitally is possible today.
What does that actually mean for the consumer's experience? Can you take us through what a personalized video commercial would look like?
So hopefully the consumer does not see something different, and he's not supposed to see something different, but the ad is for him. So it's telling him about the local products, the local store. It's telling him about the weather outside and what products are fit for that weather. What are the real-time prices on the website? So the consumer just gets the video ad. It's a lean-back experience, but he's got messages which are tailored to him based on who he is, where he is, time and day, and so on.
Cool. What do you see as the biggest challenge to your business's growth and adoption in the marketplace?
I think it's a new technology. It's a new technology, and there's an adoption cycle, and the brands need to understand that this exists. First of all, it's knowing that this sort of video personalization is out there, and the agencies need to adopt it. But it's being adopted pretty quickly, and a lot of the brands that are doing this already in search and in display and are now moving into video see why this is the right step for them to personalize a video message as well.
Great. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot in the last 2 days is branded advertising and how to attract more really quality, creative, branded advertising to the web. And I'm wondering how iView, with its one-to-one sort of messaging, fits into that call.
Perfect. At the end of the day, we look at video advertisement as smarter TV. So anything you can do on TV, the same idea is, but now in online you can do so many smarter things and we can measure it. So now you can personalize the ad and we can measure how that how much that is better than just the original TV ad. So the ability to come to the brand and say, this is how your TV ad performed, this is how your online ad performed. And when I say performed, I'm not talking about click rates and mouse overs. I'm talking about lift in purchase intents and relevancy and favorability. So being able to come to the brand advertiser and show him how much online video is more powerful when you personalize the message, I think that's going to be a key driver in brand adoption.
Is this type of technology widely available? I mean, is it easy for a publisher to say, begin to offer this?
Yeah, perfect. So we have two things. First of all, we're VAST. So that means that any publisher that supports VAST can support us. And we also, at the end of the core, what we do is we generate thousands of videos. So we're almost like a CDN. So we're a third-party ad server. When we get called, we serve the right video to the right person. So there's no integration needed. There's no hassle. Every publisher can run us tomorrow. And we build the technology that way in order to achieve a mass scale.
So you're based in New York City, and we're here at Internet Week in New York City. How's it been being a new technology provider in the big city?
Okay, so first of all, this is where it's all happening from the advertising perspective. We just moved to New York. We just opened our headquarters here. And yes, you can see that, you've got all the right people here, all the right mindset. Video is very powerful in New York. The agencies understand it. The brands understand it. So I think New York is the right place for a company like ours.
Great. Thank you very much.
And Tal points to NASA as an example of what to do and what not to do. Compare the Apollo 13 near disaster, famously reenacted by Hollywood, with the Columbia Space Shuttle genuine disaster. During the Apollo 13 mission, Flight Director Gene Kranz had teams constantly drilling to cope with any problem. They worked in close proximity, sometimes circumventing civil service rules, becoming masters of improvisation. The directive was as important as it was short. Improvise. I care about what it can do. Then consider the Columbia disaster, decades later. This time, the engineers working on the shuttle gave a full warning about the foam that had struck the shuttle wing on takeoff. Even while the mission was underway and the shuttle was in orbit, might it have been possible to perform a spacewalk, even to repair the damaged wing? But such possibilities weren't even considered. Management just overruled them. These two space flights represent two models, a standardized model and an experimental one. In the standardized model, routine and systems govern everything. In the experimental model, all new information is evaluated and debated. In Israel, the need for keen intelligence analysis has brought forth an important conclusion. The failure of imagination can be deadly. When it comes to spaceflight, each new mission needs to be treated as a test, a new source of data. Likewise, fighting wars is also an experimental endeavor. In Israel, there's also a keen understanding of the difference between Rosh Gadol and Rosh Katan. Literally, a big head as opposed to a little head. Rosh Katan implies interpreting orders narrowly, avoiding responsibility and extra work. Rosh Gadol is all about using judgment and whatever effort is necessary. It stresses improvisation over discipline. It's all about challenging the chief over respect for hierarchy. Believe it or not, challenge the chief is an injunction given in the IDF to junior soldiers. Here's Rosh Gadol in action. In the middle of the Apollo 13 crisis, Gene Kranz assembled special teams to deal with the oxygen problem and come up with a solution fast. Rosh Gadol, the big head, in action. Now consider the difference between Israel and another society that's been coming on strong in recent years, Singapore. Unlike Israel, Singapore has cultivated a polite society. Dissent is discouraged. By contrast, in Israel, the debrief is as important as the live battle. It's a laboratory for learning. What lessons are to be learned? Nobody learns from being defensive. We might, in fact, call the IDF traditionless. After all, it began as an underground militia, literally in cellars, hiding from the British, who controlled Palestine prior to the War of Independence in 1948. The 1948 War of Independence amounted to nothing less than miraculous survival for the fledgling Jewish state. Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, tasked the British-trained Chaim Laskov to examine the IDF. The idea was innovation was needed, even after victory. It was all to prevent ossification, that is, getting crusty. The IDF could never afford to rest on its laurels. The end result was a brilliant preemptive strike against Israel's enemies at the outset of the 1967 Six-Day War. Even so, another overhaul of the IDF was called for. And again, after the 2006 Lebanon War. Commissions of inquiry have in fact been undertaken in a public way, even during war. In 2006, the public wanted to know about the failure of the IDF to completely destroy Hezbollah in Lebanon. It was determined that the IDF suffered from a lack of organization and improvisation. The lesson? Never succumb to the danger of groupthink. Argue with the chief. And, by the way, Israel's culture of disagreement might even help with zombies. Just so happens we have an article about the 10th man. Few things galvanize foreign policy decision-making like a zombie apocalypse. The latest undead epic film, World War Z, singles out Israeli intelligence for special praise in its response. Indeed, as the world bends and breaks under the swell of the underworld denizens, Jerusalem stands proud atop the tide. Why is that? According to Max Brooks, whose original 2006 novel inspired the film, Israeli intelligence beat the one enemy stronger than zombie hordes, groupthink. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, a war so spectacular in its exposure of intelligence failure that it revolutionized Israel's approach to decision-making. While Egypt and Syria led the Arab states against the largely unsuspecting Israel, it was not entirely ignorant of the threat. In fact, Israel's Directorate of Military Intelligence was almost completely aware of Arab plans by mid-1973, but following assumptions about the unlikelihood of an Arab alliance along with Israel's inability to secure certain armaments and its expulsion of Soviet advisors, the flow of misinformation from the Arabs was accepted as truth. Amman remained confident that the probability of war was low. The rest, as they say, is history. Remarkable failures in military intelligence history. Max Brooks predicts the Israelis as survivors of World War Z because they faced this enemy before, the enemy of unchallenged assumptions, of jovial consensus governing, of inducing agreement as a false pretense for quality of decisions. Brooks calls the Israeli doctrine adopted after the Yom Kippur War the strategy of the 10th man. In reality, it has the even more audacious title of the devil's advocate. Following the recommendation of the Agranat Commission in 1973 through 1974, military intelligence established a control unit that was expected to play this role of the devil's advocate. Its responsibility was to produce a range of explanations and assessments of events that avoided relying on a single concept, as happened in 1973. Brooks puts it a bit more dramatically. If 10 men are in a room and 9 agree on how to interpret and respond to a situation, the 10th man must disagree. His duty is to find the best possible argument for why the decision of the group is flawed. Social psychology and foreign policy analysis have long been bedfellows in deconstructing some of history's most alarming failures of decision-making. The Bay of Pigs invasion is one much-loved case study where American intelligence and decision-makers backslapped each other into one of the most disastrous exercises in the history of U.S. foreign policy. The interesting problem is that such decision-making inverts the usual logic. More minds don't always make better decisions. In fact, the more amiable the group and the greater its desire for the false quality metric of consensus, the more likely it will make bad decisions. Foreign policy analyst Irving Janis speaks to this big idea. The more amiability and esprit de corps among the members of a policy-making in-group, the greater is the danger that independent critical thinking will be replaced by groupthink, which is likely to result in irrational and dehumanizing actions directed against outgroups. In other words, no matter how responsible, how intelligent, or how influential people in a room are, the inertia of social cohesion and group dynamics will push consensus decision-making, which tends to be bad decision-making. This danger is even more prominent in religious settings because of the false perception that spiritual unity should preclude serious disagreement. A kind of pre-installed groupthink manufactures an emotional and spiritual subtext that, since everyone believes in certain fundamental confessions, decisions thereafter should be more or less harmonious. Gone, then, is Alastair MacIntyre's notion of constructive disagreement. Gone, indeed, is that bedrock Westminster principle of a loyal opposition. Loyal opposition is precisely what qualifies the 10th man. It allows for marshaling the best arguments to push against groupthink, to press the soft bits, and to expose the liabilities. Our systems badly need loyal opposition, not mere contradiction. In the famous words of Monty Python, but argument. A loyal opposition has the common good front of mind. It shares the ends but purposefully dissents on the means. A loyal opposition is not a contradiction in terms, but rather the promise of clear decision-making and accountability. And it's such a powerful tool in our foreign policy arsenal that Max Brooks thinks it just might forestall the zombie apocalypse. We have political, financial, and environmental apocalypse aplenty without the undead. We badly need our 10th man. What lessons have we learned in the end from Israel's example? For one thing, it's not a bad idea to devolve authority and responsibility downward. Add to that the idea that we need a little chutzpah. Cross boundaries, turn societal norms upside down, agitate in a free market economy to catalyze radical ideas. Call it asynchrony. There's also what is called the complexity science concept, the edge of chaos, where rigid order and random chaos meet and generate adaptation, complexity, and creativity. Bottom line, it's all about critical reassessment, undergirded by a doctrine of experimentation. Now, how's that for a winning formula?